poetry and all. They are love and understanding, and they're never anymore. They are languages and lovers, they are poetry and all. They are love and understanding, and they're never anymore. There are canyons, they are yawning in the night. They are rank and bitter anger, they are all devoid of light. They are fear and blind suspicion, they are apathy and pride. They are dark and soul foreboding, and they're oh so very wide. They are fear and blind suspicion, they are apathy and pride. They are dark and soul foreboding, and they're oh so very wide. Let us build a bridge of music, let us cross through the song. Let us span another canyon, let us write another wrong. Oh, and if someone should ask us where we're off and bound today, we will tell them building bridges and be off and on our way. Oh, and if someone should ask us where we're off and bound today, we will tell them building bridges and be off and on our way. We will tell them building bridges.
We will tell them building bridges and be off and on our way. Thank you very much for tuning in. This is Bridges Programming, Sunday on the Front Stoop, the longest stoop in the world. And we are here on Sunday. I'm Jeff Bella. Next to me is Susan Comont, and on the line is
hello.
And on the line is Dennis Carius. Hello, Dennis. How are you?
Good, Jeff. Good. And I'm great. I'm really happy to be on with you and Susan.
Is it too loud, the air conditioner behind us?
Oh, I got to shut that down.
Oh, can you hear it, or is it making it?
Well, it'll make it a lot quieter.
But I think Dennis can hear us fine, right?
I meant to do that, but I was running a little late today, so we are.
It's very hot here where we are, so humid more than hot. Unusually humid.
Well, that's part of the non-believing global warming theorists that we have here. Okay, we are here, and Susan's going to read to you what she's the producer of this program and figure out what we're going to be doing today. So
I've been promoted.
Well, thank you, Susan.
Been promoted to producer here.
That's great.
Incredible title. That means you produce stuff, right? I guess that's where
I guess so. She's the one who figures out what we're doing.
Well, we were reading an article actually that came to us on the email the other day. So it's out of the website Nature and Humanity or something like that. You can find it yourself because I have the title of the article. It's called The Transcendent Voice of Conscience and the author is Katherine Hirshfeld, Hirshfeld. Can look it up under her name and that title, The Transcendent Voice of Conscience. And I have a quote from the article. Conscience transcends culture. It is an inner force of somewhat mysterious origin that shapes human action according to universally agreed upon templates of behavior. Article 1 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, for instance, makes no reference to culture or relativism when it declares all humans to be, quote, endowed with reason and conscience, unquote. The document derives its power from universal consensus about human values. And that's the end of that quote. And that's from this article. And that's where we're going to start. we're going to dedicate this program to trying to diffuse some of the anxieties and fears that people are having, over so many, shootings recently. We hear about them. And, this isn't the first time that dominant cultures are trying to sideline or eliminate other cultures. And in this article by Katherine Hirshfelds, she talks about how the American Indians were marginalized, and we're talking about 1925, after most of the Indians were on reservations in various almost uninhabitable
By the way, 1925
places.
is not that long ago.
Right, but this is a type. I'm just trying to say that what happened to the American Indians continues to happen over and over again. I mean, it happened in Vietnam. It's happening in Saudi Arabia. But I'm going to, because this is the example in this article of the way that American Indians were treated. They were put on reservations, and then they were their children taken away from them and reculturated, so to speak, in special Indian schools.
To make them think the way we
think. So that they would stop speaking their native language. They would start to behave in a
civilized manner.
Well, yeah, quote unquote.
According to our culture. But, before we do that, I want to get some homework done. You're listening to Bridges Programming, which is Sunday on the Front Stoop. This is our normal Sunday talk, and you can see it on your screen. And it's the actual impetus behind this program is something called the Human Renewable Energy Measure. We try to do all humanitarian programs on here. Most of the time we'll come across with all the problems, but the answer we feel is that simple measurement called the Human Renewable Energy Measure. And what that means, that measurement, is that we all live about 80 years of age. That's according to science. Some of us will live a lot longer, some of us will live a lot shorter, but close enough, 80 years of age in today's technology. We can easily do that with reasonable comfort, and that's good enough for science. We all use about 1 million calories of food a year, or energy units, you can call them calories or watts or kilowatts or whatever you want to break it down to, but it's always the same. No matter how you measure energy like temperature, it's maybe in Celsius or Fahrenheit, but the measurement is the same. It'd be different language or different units, but it's always the same. And that holds true for water and shelter. So we could now calculate that a human being's worth is measured in time, or that we've agreed upon. These are agreed upon measurements and energy units and food and shelter. And then we go to the problems of what's happening and how we think that a simple measurement put into the world vocabulary will change the way our behavior is, because we know now, if you ask anybody in the world what they are worth, they'll most of the time will say we're precious or incalculable, but it is calculable. You're worth education, food, and shelter for about an hour of your human lifetime a day.
Workday.
Workday. Right. That would be your contribution to the society around you. There's no need for welfare or minimum wage, because your basic needs are met for 1 hour of your time. Your wants, however, are totally different. So when your wants, that's why we're different as species. Our wants are different. Our mind says we want maybe a green car. or a red car, or I decided to have a car that changes color.
Or wants can be what you want to do with your
Or
time.
wants may be, I want to just sit and do nothing for the day and just meditate.
Or
Or you know, whatever you choose to do is your wants, but that's not the same wants as someone else. So that's what makes us human.
right.
But the basic needs met are always the same. They don't change. You can't live without a certain amount of food and a certain amount of water, and you must have a certain shelter for depending upon where you live, and you have to have the education to know what you need. So these are the basic needs met, and that's what the measurement's about. And if we can put the measurement into the vocabulary, we'll probably get a functional government, a functional economic system. We'll stop killing one another. We don't need armies. We don't need to kill one another. We wouldn't have the pressures of life that are creating the things we're seeing in today's
Well, the atrocities and the violence.
into violence in today's markets. It's just amazing to listen to the news and hear about shootings and what they're going to do about it and how they're going to pass laws and regulations. The problems happen to be directly related, and it's always been the past 5,000 years about economics, from the beginning of the time when we had abundance. And once we had abundance, we had to have someone who can protect our abundance, and therefore our economic system started. And before that, we all worked in cooperation. So
when there was a clash of cultures, when the colonists came here from Europe, you know, they came and they saw how the American Indians were living, and they thought they were, you know, terribly primitive, but they were not. They were highly evolved, had been living as migrating tribes for thousands of years here, and had a highly evolved culture and language, and so that was a situation where neither of the parties who encountered each other had any understanding. Well, I think the Indians may have had a better understanding of what was coming their way once they saw it than the colonists had of what they were observing, because their intent was coming from Europe to get as much profit out of what they called the New World as possible. So their motives were not to preserve anything here that they found. But going to Katherine Hirshfelds' article, she says here, the Indians, quote, could not vote, had no access to, this is in 1925, could not vote, had no access to their own money, and were expected to surrender their children to government boarding schools as part of a forced acculturation program designed to eradicate traditional languages and cultures. Today, these practices would be condemned as ethnocide. That's the first time I've seen that word, no genocide, but this is another way of destroying a culture and destroying people, because you know the identity of a group is, if you destroy it, often the people cannot function and then are unable to survive. But in the early 20th century, quote, forced acculturation was viewed as progressive and a progressive alternative to genocidal practices of the previous century. So they felt they'd moved on a bit. And the people were very, very aggressive about, enforcing this. And she talks about an account of a nurse who was trying to set up nursing facilities on the reservations and how, horrible it was for the people there. So the goal was, what they felt they were doing was rehumanizing this population, or changing it into a group that was recognizable to the aggressive group that was taking over. So, that's what they called rehumanizing. But here we got, quote, culture is a term used by anthropologists to refer to historically specific knowledge, beliefs, and practices. Cultures are now understood on the basis of relativism, which asserts the fundamental equality of all human groups. The doctrine of relativism was developed by Franz Boas in 1920s and has gone on to become the dominant value system in American education. Today, we celebrate the specific histories and beliefs of all groups with secular rituals of diversity, inclusion, and acceptance. The narrow specificity of relativism, however, limits our ability to explore universal traits like conscience, unquote. I think she's being a little too hopeful with her statement that today we celebrate all these things because we are actually marginalizing groups like who have are Islamic, who are have a different religion than Protestant Christian religions.
We're doing the same things.
We're doing it, but we're doing it on a much larger scale now. And so But
that's because our populations worldwide are bigger. The way we control the media is bigger.
Right, we can have a farther reach.
Yeah, much further reach. And another word, and Dennis, you like this word, I know this. What's the other word when they say what was the word you used earlier? Humanizing. What's another word you think for rehumanizing the population?
That's quote unquote, because it really isn't what it says it
Right.
wants to be.
What's the other word you would say for that?
That's a good question. Rehumanizing the population.
Yeah, in other words.
Wow.
Wouldn't you call that
eliminating what
wouldn't
they're
you
doing
call that brainwashing?
Yeah, right.
Wouldn't you call that brainwashing?
And propaganda.
Which is what the main media is doing to all our population?
Brainwashing, right. Yes. Brainwashing.
Yeah, it's a form of brainwashing.
It's a form of brainwash. They want you to stop thinking the way you're thinking and think the way we're thinking, and that's a form of brainwashing.
At the same time, they're brainwashing the people that are supposedly forcing, that are, the colonists. They're saying, oh, you are entitled to do this to this group of people because they're, primitive and less than human, or they're violent, or something's wrong with them. So we need to, if they don't start doing things the way we're doing it, then, they should be eliminated, or they should be marginalized and not allowed to participate in our country, or our government, or economics, or whatever. But
and they did that with women too.
Oh God.
Before, not this long ago, during the
20s also, women were not even able to vote in this country.
And they used to burn women at the stakes for being witches before that.
Right.
And in this was our country. This was in the good old US of A. And then in Salem, Massachusetts, they burned women at the stake. And they used it for religious reasons. But the reality is they didn't want any women to own land and be business people. So that was the problem. Businessmen, as they called them. They didn't want business women. They wanted only businessmen. And they marginalized that. And then they did the same things to blacks and Chinese. And then they tried doing that with the Jews. Hitler did that with Jews. And they marginalized that just to control the economic systems around the world. And before that, it was the kings did that. Prior to that, with Mennonites, and they had slaves all over the place. And the only time they didn't do that in history was prior to the kings, or prior to abundance. And therefore we had cooperation amongst humanity. But ever since then, it's always been competition amongst humanity. And then we fought battles for land, because land produces physical things that help humanity that we can capitalize on. Well, once you start to see this, the only way to change that is by putting into the vocabulary a way of measuring humanity. And this is what we're doing.
But it's a measure that asserts our common needs.
Common need, right?
And it's
basic needs.
Yes, our basic common needs. And in this article, Katherine Hirshfelds asserts something very interesting about conscience, that this is a universal trait that we can all have in common too. I mean, when you're looking for commonality, you are then going in a direction where, ultimately human needs can be universally measured and met.
Right.
Because it's when we start to separate ourselves, on religious lines, on cultural behavior lines, on race, language, what nation you're from. All these things are tending to separate us. And, this is just one example in this article about how horrendous an effect that had on the Native American population here. Any country can find their own history with that, kind of behavior, creating huge tragedy and misery. And once again, I'm going to read, and I think this is the core of the article. Conscience, quote, is commonly understood as an innate moral sense or the ability to know right from wrong. Conscience transcends culture. It is an inner force of somewhat mysterious origin that shapes human action according to universally agreed upon templates of behavior. And that's what we're talking about with the human renewable energy measure. It has to eventually become a universally agreed upon template of human needs. We already have a moral sense with our conscience, our shared conscience, our shared human conscience. We have a shared moral sense, and this is the undercurrent of everything. Everything else is an overlay on that. How we form our cultural traditions, etc., our religions, our languages, these things are superimposed. And there is something much more profound, and that is, what we agree on.
I want to get
and what it is to be human.
I want to get Dennis into this.
Okay.
Dennis, I'm going to ask you a question, and I think we can come to the understanding. If I tell you, I want you to send me something that is the color black, would you know what I was talking about? Because we agree on the color black. But supposing I said to you, I want 2 shades lighter than black. Can you tell me exactly what I'm talking about?
Not exactly, no.
Right, because we all agree that the color black, a normal thought process, is black, white, green, red, orange. We can pretty much agree on those colors.
You mean an agreed upon thought
process?
An
agreed upon thought process of a color.
That's what humans do.
Right. Now they're different. Now we can agree about the shades of that because
that's your individual.
That's individual thinking process,
which is
totally,
very, very important also.
But it's subjective.
But once you just are operating on that level, there is no agreement.
Right. If I tell you I want to meet you at 10:45,
that works.
We know what 10:45 is.
Close to it.
Everywhere in the world, within a few minutes, we know that's what we've agreed upon. Now, if you're late on that, of course, you'll be late. I mean, then you may be only 2 minutes late or a day late. Or now the Indians didn't have a precise clock. So their precise clock was, I'll meet you within the first full moon. That was a 30-day.
And they were traveling by foot or eventually by horse, but mostly by foot originally because the horses were.
But they understood that it was a universal measurement that we all agreed upon before we had, as we evolved, we got better measurements and better time frames. And as we evolved as a species, we were able to put together a vocabulary, and that doesn't mean it's English or Russian or French.
No.
It was all worldwide vocabulary that meant white or black or green or red. that's worldwide, or the speed limit, or the time factor.
Right.
We put together within as we evolved, as we got older and learned more, and people think they're so smart today, that they think that there's nothing else that you can't possibly do what we're suggesting to do. But I don't believe that. I think that they're paralyzed. They're intellectually paralyzed because they can't see that we have so much more to learn as a species until we stop killing one another and stop polluting our life support system, which is our air and our water and our soil. We have so much more to learn. So that's where I really believe we have to go forward to produce this measurement within the vocabulary. We do not want to keep on killing other human beings. We do not want to keep on messing up our life support system, which is our air, water, and soil. And the way we get that is we need to have that measurement in our vocabulary. Now, I think that that's just the beginning of helping humanity and the rest of the species on this planet. And and I'm not being a religious person on Sunday, but I can say to you, the Pope is saying pretty much the same thing. And I know that everybody who hears this conversation agrees that that all humanity has to have their basic needs met, their education, food, and shelter. But there's no way of measuring that. There's no agreed upon understanding like the color black, green, red, white. That doesn't have the same understanding. So that's where we're coming from, with an agreed upon measurement. And I'm going to tell everybody this story. I've said it before on these programs. We play a game with our granddaughter when we take a drive. And maybe it's a half-hour drive, so we have time to play fun with. And I always point out something like, look at that red cow, but it's not really a red cow, it's a red barn. And I said to her one day, I said, look at that red cow. And she said, Grandpa, that's not a red cow. That's a red barn. And I said to her, how do you know it's a red barn? And she looked at me very seriously and said, because we all agree it's a red barn. And that's a profound thing. I never caught that until about a year or so later. But that's a profound statement. It's what we all agree upon as a species. We all agree upon as a species that no human being should be shot. We all agree upon as a species that no one should go hungry or starve or not have education. We all agree upon that, but we don't have the measurement for it. And once the measurement is there, then we can say, here's where we're coming from. Here's how we judge a population, a country, a state, or town. And the boundaries that humans make are irrelevant boundaries. They're good for pinpointing location, but they're not good for taking advantage in competition with. And when we take advantage in competition with, and we try to take natural resources like we're doing in China, like we're taking human resources from them, and they're exploiting us by taking our labor with money, and then with our time, and they're trying to trade some fairness, but there doesn't seem to be able to measure that. And we're doing the same thing in Africa and Syria. We're doing the same thing all over the world. We're dropping bombs and drones and killing people all over the world because we want their natural resources. We're trying to be in competition and taking advantage of. And that's what that woman Susan's quoting from was saying, that we keep on marginalizing American Indians, we marginalize the Chinese, marginalize the Jews or the blacks. Muslims.
And
now it's the Muslims,
right? Exactly, and the Japanese during the Second World War.
And they control us by, we need a war on terrorism. We need a war. We're at war. We're at the Cold War.
It's always the same language.
Always the same mantra.
Right.
No, we don't need a war. We need a cooperation amongst ourselves.
There's real fear. There's real death happening. People are confused about what the motives of all this are. But it's and that's why this kind of rhetoric works over and over and over through the centuries. It's worked because people are afraid and they don't understand what's going on, and they're going to listen to the loudest voices and the the most aggressive propaganda that's around them. I'm going to go on with some more from this article about, our commonality, and that's what it needs to be emphasized in a time when people are trying to pit religions and cultures against each other. Is we need to realize that everybody has common humanity, and conscience is part of this, a moral core. Every religion, every organized religion that humans have created, its basis is peaceful cooperation. It's do unto others as you would have them do unto you.
Not before they do unto you.
Yeah, right. This is the basis of every organized religion that's ever been created in history. And you can research this yourself, and that's what you should do. You shouldn't listen to the propaganda.
No, we are giving
your
you
own.
right.
Well, there's good propaganda and bad propaganda, and you have to choose what you think.
That's subjective.
Is what.
It's subjective.
So, even in animals, they see empathy. And so we have it even more evolved as humans because we communicate in a more intricate way, we think, than animals because we can't know this. But as she's saying here that even when religions become oppressive and try to force they proselytize to the point of aggression. Even in those kind of history, those points in history, and we're in a point in history like that. Let's face it. They're trying to pit Islam against Christianity or Christianity against Islam right now. Even in those most, in quote, this is a quote from the article, but we also know from history, quote, that even the most repressive religious cultures still produce non-conforming thinkers who reject organized violence and recognize the common humanity of ethnic or religious others. Common humanity. The dissenting voices represent a natural effervescence of conscience that can never be fully suppressed. Some special quality of insight and imagination allows a select few to see beyond the limits of culture and recognize the essential personhood of outsiders not conventionally granted human status. So, unquote. And so then this is the danger zone. We're trying to eliminate personhood from a whole half the world.
You're trying to get rid of humanity.
Know that this is not a good direction when you see this happening, and we have to step back, as painful as it may be, to do so, and have more dissenting voices that quote, will naturally effervesce the conscience of humanity, of our human, of our common humanity, and we, it's not hard to see that we have this as a human species, if you really are, not being, too badly influenced by the propaganda.
Well, there's another problem that when you're so caught up with
we're caught up in now.
We're trying to make a living and trying to listen to the news that's talking about this group is no good or that group is no good, or we have to vote this way or vote that way. Before we get out of here today, I'm going to try to show you how we broke our backs over the years to talk about how bad smoking is, and we passed laws and more laws about trying to control the smoking industry, the tobacco industry, and
what did you get?
I'm going to get that after when you finish that article. I want to get to that, and this to prove to a point that you can't write laws to change the system until you've changed the economic system. And this is a direct proof. And Dennis, I mean, you think we should be smoking cigarettes and cigars and stuff?
But I don't think smoking is good for us.
And we did pass laws to change that, right?
Well, depending on, I mean, smoking marijuana, yes.
No, we have laws in this country that says you can't advertise smoking on television, right?
Right. There were all kinds of
There were all
commercials
kinds of commercials
TV
on television and
about
radio about smoking, right?
Oh, right. Some buildings you can't even walk in that building if you're smoking.
Well, and
restaurants.
Now I want to show people this.
This is what we got in the
We
mail
just got
2
this
days
in the
ago.
mail. Now, the premise on not smoking is because it creates lung disease in most cases. At least we think our science says it does. And it costs the society a lot of their life work to keeping the economic system going. So what we got in the mail yesterday was this. I don't know if you can see this.
Let's see if we can get it. Now here's the
I'm gonna try-
Marlboro
I'm gonna-
Man. He's
It's
still
the
alive.
Marlboro Man.
It's amazing. He's been smoking a long time. I can't
And
imagine.
on the very bottom of this, it tells you, because they've conformed to the law,
There's a little
that
warning.
cigarettes, it says surgeon warning.
Surgeon General warning.
This
Right?
came in the mail, and it must have cost them a small
But this is
fortune.
an advertisement with a coupon to get a discount on a
And then you get a discount for $3 off, $3
carton
off
of
a
cigarettes.
carton of their cigarettes. Well, the reality is, I'm not trying to give them a commercial break here, but then they have in the back they have all these other little photographs, very sexually oriented, with a guy holding his pack of tobacco by his crotch and with leather gloves on, and then
he's a man.
He's a man, a real man's man,
Right.
and therefore smoking is a good thing. And if you go back to all the movies, the old movies,
we've moved forward, but
all movies, they had guys smoking cigarettes and had a drink in their hand.
right.
That's the way you should be living. Well, the tobacco industry, the sugar industry, the oil companies, all these corporations, and especially U.S. Sugar, United States Sugar Corporation, you can see trains running around here all day long, and they devastate land. They also produce jobs, but the fact of the matter is, white sugar is really not good for most people, even though I'm a sugar person. And then you have the tobacco companies, which I just showed you. And even though we've outlawed that, but they advertise in certain areas because they want to get their Marlboro cigarettes out.
And this is right through the mail.
Right in the
And it's in select areas they do this too.
because they want
Right.
to increase their market share. Now, that's the other end of the same spectrum. The same other end of the rainbow, as I don't like to call it that because that rainbow is so pretty, but this is something that's terrible. On one side of the spectrum is they're trying to badmouth groups of people, so you have a war and you side,
and
you
fear
divide.
them, right.
And the other side of the spectrum is where they're advertising, and we know that's bad. We know unconsciously, subconsciously, that you cough and mucus.
But the authorities are saying, don't worry about it. You can do this and it won't matter.
And
we are learning to, all through our lives to respect authority. I mean, that's one of the first things that you learn in school.
When you go to school, they have a ring the bell, go to the next class.
Right.
You make sure you respect the principal. Well, the thing is, if the principal's lying to you, like how many years ago when I was younger, they said you have to duck and cover. So in case of a nuclear attack, they'd have you duck under a wooden desk when the bombs hit. Like, it's going to protect you. That's insanity. I mean, just stop dropping nuclear bombs is the right way to do this, but we can't because we're at war or theoretically with another country. We're not in cooperation with another country to stop killing humanity. We need to take their natural resources. And that's the basic premise of the HRM, the human measurement that stops people from killing one another, respecting one another's belief systems, and making sure that we don't continue
Well, it emphasizes our commonality.
Right.
And it doesn't make us all into automatons. It by satisfying our common needs, then each individual has the time and energy to fulfill their own individual promise or whatever, of their lives. And right now, we spend most of our lives making money so that we can actually just live.
Just to survive.
Just to survive.
And now watch the
and
kicker.
So you're actually, having your individual choice is very, very limited within the kind of.
Watch the kicker on this. The kicker on this is you have the individual choice to go to school, to get a degree, to make more money. So you have to take out a loan to go to school, to get the degree, to make more money, to pay off the loan. Wow. Do you see the ironic insanity with that? So you're working for the person who's giving you more money because you got a degree. So you got to pay this loan off. So you're working for the banks for the interest for the loan. You're working for the business of the schools that you're paying for the theoretical knowledge, which you can probably get just as good or better than anywhere online. And people, if they depart their knowledge, like humanity does to one another, like your parents taught you what they thought was right, they don't charge you for that. Your neighbors, your friends teach you what they believe in, that they thought was right, or how you could fix the car. I love these programs that teach you how to fix your car. They give you this information for nothing. Nowadays, if you call up a mechanic or you call up a big car industry, car group, they want to charge you for it. And then the small guy now has to charge you for it because he's got to stay alive. So he's got to make his money too. So we're all caught up in this insanity of trying to make money. And then on top of it all, they tell you, well, your neighbor across the street is going to harm you. So you got to be afraid of that neighbor. So before they harm you, we're going to drop bombs on them. And then when they come out of the building, you got to shoot them in the head. Well, that's what we're doing in all parts of the world. And even though it would be insane for me to tell you that it's your across the street neighbor right now in your community, that's what we're doing anywhere else in the world, because we have a direct neighbor, and they're in England, and they're our partners, they're our neighbors, they're our human. And he's saying we have to go kill people to stop this horrendous war on terrorism. And then we have another thing I just heard on the illustrious news media this morning, was they're teaching people how to protect themselves against
civilians have to learn how to
protect themselves against shooters.
Right.
Well, the chance of a shooter coming and shooting you,
it's more likely you're going to die in an automobile
accident or get hit by a drone or something.
Oh no, I didn't
this is insanity. What they're doing, and the answer to the one woman said, "Well, I'd rather have this to know how to defend myself
if there's an active
than
shooter,
be
what
afraid."
They call an active shooter. This is the new term for that.
The reason why you have active shooters, not in all cases, I'm not trying to say that I have the answer, but in most cases, it's because of the pressures of the society around us, which in turn say to people, well, if you're a real good Christian, abortions are no good, so therefore anyone who performs abortion should be shot. That's an insanity, absolute insanity. And the pressures on people to try to do good in an insane way are they keep on promoting this.
The irony of that is, if you have a respect for life, why are you killing another life? In the name of respect for life. It just absolutely makes no sense at all.
Now, if you believe in a maker or a God or Jesus or whatever you want to believe in, it's not up to you to judge that individual. They will meet their own maker, and the maker will make that decision, not you as a mortal who really doesn't have the knowledge to make that decision. And the trouble with all of our intellectuals out there, they're also intellectually paralyzed. just as much as a religious fanatic.
Well, I actually just wrote down something to that effect. If you let me go ahead and I'll say, when a person is proclaimed an expert, it can have the effect of stopping their further development. Not all the time, but oftentimes it can. They don't want to make a misstep and be taken off the expert list. And it has lots of advantages if you're an expert in this culture that we're in the United States, or probably other countries too. If you are labeled an expert, you get to invited to do lectures, you get paid for that, you go interview you on NPR, you get to do that, you get a teaching position at a good college. They don't want to wander too far mentally from their officially accepted expertise. If they've been declared an expert and this is what they do to be declared it, they're not going to go too far from that and then have it, possibly taken away from them, because this is a huge accomplishment for them to have been proclaimed this within a society that is extremely. Our society is very narrow in what it accepts at this point in history. We are narrowing and narrowing and narrowing it. And the more that fear is also narrowing it, and we feel that each civilian has to have be trained as a martial arts expert, as one of their, just like reading, writing, and arithmetic. We should have that as one of our skills. This is going further and further away from our common humanity, our common moral values, and our conscience. Do you want me to finish the article?
Yeah, sure.
And then there'll be some time to. Katherine Hirshfelds goes on to say, that just like we're trying to assert with the measure of measuring needs, common needs, and fulfilling them through our economic system for a minimal amount of work from a mature individual who is, we, of course, the very young and the very old, or sick, or somehow unable to do work, they will be carried by the rest of society like they traditionally have been, through the ages, and nurtured. But people who can work, and that's what we're built for. We stand on two legs. We have hands that are free, so that we can make things, and so that we can work at whatever interests us. And so this minimal amount of commitment, just for the basic needs. You can work more for your wants, your individual desires. Of course, the economic system is still there for that. But she is saying, and this is a commonality, another thing that is a universal language, and the author mentions this only in the form of poetry, but I would say that, all the arts are a common language, music, the writing arts, it's just poetry is among them. Poetry is a very distilled form of the writing arts, and it can transcend the limits, as she says here, of culture to resonate with the universality of conscience. And she goes on to say, when the poetry of dissidence is truly heard, it can regenerate a rapid configuration of culture away from absolutism and toward relativism and tolerance. This transformation allows people of different religious traditions or ethnic identities to live in close proximity with each group, preserving its own traditions, yet still granting the other full human status. And we know that, we can share a delight in music that comes from every culture.
For instance, let me give you for instance. If you have a religious person next to you, supposing you have a Christian, a Jew, a Muslim, a Buddhist, and we all look at the ocean and the cloud, and we all see how beautiful that is. There's no difference. There's no difference there. We all understand the beauty of that.
Right.
If we all see a shocking picture or listen to a certain bit of music, I mean, even if it's not in your culture, you're going to say that's that sounds good. If it sounds good, it is good. So music and views, nature, humans producing art of whatever type, be it paintings or music or poetry or even thought processes. Matter of fact, when we had
these are expressions of commonality, and things that we can all understand, just like we have made our measurements to be common use mechanisms.
I want to blow our own horn
make
because
life
we
easier for everyone.
We went to a conference once in Split, Croatia, and there was a lot of comments about what we were doing, and people were bad-mouthing us. And one person said, the HREM, at the time it was called the HRM, the HREM is such a beautiful concept.
Elegant.
Such an elegant concept that it's so simple, and the clarity of it is so, this guy got it right away, that it'll probably never be understood.
No, never happened.
Never happened because it can't be, it was just so simple, it's so elegant. And that's what we feel as though.
And that's what our commonality is. It is simple, it is elegant, it is something God.
When a baby's born, you see when an animal or a cat or a kitten or a puppy or a baby is born, that's why we have special names for them. There's a certain elegance and beauty in that birth. And unfortunately, it's the opposite way. When we see somebody being tortured or killed, there's a certain criminal or ugliness to that. We see that. It's part of our nature. Does that make sense to you, Dennis, too?
Well, Jeff, if I were it makes sense to me, but if I were a millionaire who wants to become a billionaire, then I might disagree with that. Or especially if I were a billionaire who wants to be a trillionaire, I would definitely disagree.
What, you honestly believe that a billionaire would not see beauty in a newborn child?
No, they would see beauty, but what's more important to them might be to even get more money.
But you don't know that. See, that's strictly your belief system. I'm saying to you that from what I gather, when I see certain people who have more than I think personally than they need, they still find beauty in many, many things, that the same thing I find beauty in. Whether they're a billionaire or want to be a billionaire, or they're poverty stricken, they still find beautiful things in a newborn puppy or a newborn kitten or a child. And that's a normal commonality. Now, well,
let me ask you a question then, okay? Let's just say it's in the 1940s, okay? And you know that those children are they are so beautiful, or those little boys are so handsome. And would you say, yeah, go ahead, send those bombs over to either Hiroshima or Nagasaki? That didn't just kill men and women, but even those beautiful, little children were killed.
Right.
So was that the? Yeah.
That's the extreme.
No, but
when people don't realize that they're all united through their conscience and moral structure as a species. That's what happens when we become divided against each other and away from each other in the name of religion, in the name of ethnicity, in the name of language, in the name of nation,
or justice or freedom.
In the name of justice, freedom, fear.
They're trying to take our freedom away from us.
And it's just really frightening when you hear France willing to give up their personal freedom because of this horrible tragedy.
So are we.
Has happened recently there. That is the ultimate suicidal maneuver for any group of people, to give up their freedom.
Well, theoretically, freedom.
For the for the possibility of more safety or security, because it isn't going to happen with more violence. Violence will not bring peace and safety to groups. It just brings more violence.
Yeah, violence breeds violence, yes. And now we can
we
pretty
know
much,
that.
it's been going on for thousands of years, and actually,
And oppression is violence.
Yes.
It can come in the form of eliminating ethnic groups, as we did with tried to do with the American Indians. It can come in the form, I mean, that's called ethnogenocide, I've just learned. You can be economic genocide. I call it econogenocide. You know, there are all kinds of ways to be violent against a group or a nation or a religion that you don't want, you know, that a nation does or a culture thinks they want to eliminate. Right now, the most effective way to do it is through dividing populations against each other, and then denying the group they want to eliminate the possibility of economic survival. And that is what I would call economic genocide,
right?
Econ genocide. However, you know, you can coin all kinds of words.
You can also call it eco-genocide, which is sort of how you play. And that's the other thing is they put out words that.
And now we're inventing a word.
But they put out words that sound good, like to help mankind for the species. But meanwhile, they're doing GMOs that are hurting mankind in the long run. It's making money for mankind, but it's definitely hurting them in the long run. So they put out the word. Go ahead, Dennis. Go ahead.
Yes. Have you ever heard of something called the politics of fear?
Yes, that's right.
Right.
That's
Are
what
you
it is.
surprised that it was just like 2 or 3 days? What happened in France, in Paris, just like 2 days before, the whole world was going to be meeting there, from countries from all over the world to talk about
climate change. Right.
Right. Is global warming really happening?
Right.
You know, I think there might have been some connection, and I'm not even blaming, you know, terrorists who are doing it. I think that this could even be from a very high level of people who just did not want us to be meeting in Paris.
It could be, Dennis. You know, anything is possible in the kind of
they wanted
interactions
to take,
that are occurring right now.
Thunder. They wanted to take the thunder out of that meeting, and that's one way to do that.
And that's you know.
And people call that a false flag, that the actual countries put that stuff up there.
And the best way to control people is to have them think that they're threatened physically, and it's random and it can hit at any point. And you know, this is I mean, what could be more horrifying if you don't look behind the scenes, behind the curtain, and try to still your anxieties and put it in perspective and see that this is just another ramification of dividing people against each other and trying to assert that we have no commonality, that we have to eliminate huge swaths of diversity in our human population. And okay, well, I think Katherine Hirshfelds for the article, and please read the whole thing online. The name of it is, once again, the Transcendent Voice of Conscience.
Thank you all for listening. We'll be back on Wednesday on
where the money's gone,
here on Bridges Program.
It all comes down to energy.
Hangouts on it. Thanks so much.
Fossil fuel affects our lives in ripples on a lake. Cars and farms and factories and trucks. Supplies go down, prices soar, futures are at stake. And when it's gone, it won't come back, and we'll be out of luck. Energy, energy. It all comes down to energy.
Dennis, thank you.
Wonder where the money's gone. Well, here's some fuel for thought. It all comes down to energy. We can get our energy from corn and grass and trees. Even trash converts to biofuels. Break loose from the stranglehold of oil companies. Renewables can fuel the world. We're here to spread the news of energy, energy. It all comes down to energy. You wonder where the money's gone. Well, here's some fuel for thought. It all comes down to energy.